One of the most frustrating phases in trading happens after you've already improved. You understand your strategy. You recognize setups. You know what you're supposed to do. And yet, when it's time to execute, something feels missing. You hesitate. You second guess. You don't fully trust yourself. That gap is confusing, because logically, skill should lead to confidence. If you know more, if you've practiced more, if you've seen the patterns enough times, you should feel more secure. But many traders experience the opposite. Their skill improves faster than their self-trust. And that disconnect creates tension. You feel capable, but unsure, prepared, but hesitant, knowledgeable, but unstable. This is where a lot of traders start questioning themselves. They wonder if they're doing something wrong. They assume they lack confidence. They assume they're mentally weak. They assume they're not ready yet. But what's actually happening is much simpler and much more human. Self-trust is not built the same way skill is. Skill is cognitive. Self-trust is emotional. And emotional systems move slower. Skill comes from repetition, study, and pattern recognition. Self-trust comes from watching yourself behave the same way under pressure, over time. That difference matters. Because pressure is where most traders break. You can execute perfectly in simulation. You can make great decisions when calm. You can describe your plan clearly. But when real money is involved, emotions activate. And when emotions activate, your nervous system takes over. Your nervous system isn't impressed by how much you know. It only cares about one thing. Can I rely on you to act predictably when things feel uncomfortable? If the answer isn't consistently yes, self-trust doesn't form. That's why self-trust lags skill. Not because you're incapable, but because your nervous system hasn't seen enough evidence yet. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a trader who's been studying for months. They understand market structure. They understand entries and exits. They understand risk. But every time a trade goes against them, they feel tension. They hold a little longer than planned. They adjust stops emotionally. They hesitate on the next setup. Nothing dramatic, but enough inconsistency to matter. From the outside, it looks fine. From the inside, the nervous system is learning a lesson. This person might not protect me when it gets uncomfortable. And that lesson blocks self-trust. Because self-trust is not belief. It's felt safety. This is why affirmations don't work in trading. You can tell yourself, I trust my process. But if your behavior doesn't match, your nervous system ignores the words. It only believes actions. And it believes patterns, not promises. That's why self-trust can feel so stubborn. You can improve technically very quickly. But emotional reliability takes time. Now here's where traders make a critical mistake. They try to force self-trust. They tell themselves to just trust it. They try to suppress doubt. They push through hesitation. But forcing trust backfires, because trust can't be demanded. It has to be demonstrated. Every time you follow your plan under pressure, you deposit trust. Every time you break it, you withdraw trust. And unfortunately, emotional accounts don't allow overdrafts. This is also why traders often feel more confident before the session than during it. Before trading, there's no pressure, no risk, no exposure, no consequences. So confidence feels easy. But confidence that disappears under pressure was never confidence. It was comfort. Self-trust is what remains when comfort is gone. Let's talk about the moment self-trust is tested most. Losses. Losses are where self-trust is either reinforced or damaged, not because of the loss itself, but because of how you respond. If you take a loss and accept it, respect your stop, stay emotionally contained, continue executing your plan, your nervous system learns something important. This person can handle discomfort. That's trust. But if you take a loss and spiral, chase, avoid, overcorrect, your nerves System learns the opposite, no matter how much skill you have. This is why some traders know a lot, but still don't trust themselves. They've trained their nervous system to expect emotional instability, and the nervous system doesn't forget easily. Now here's the part that frustrates traders. You might be doing mostly the right things, but self-trust doesn't respond to mostly. It responds to consistency, predictability, reliability. That's why even small deviations matter. They don't ruin performance, but they slow trust formation. This is also why traders often feel like they're close. They are, but closeness doesn't register emotionally. Only repetition does. Let's shift perspective. Instead of asking, "Why don't I trust myself yet?" ask, "What evidence have I given my nervous system?" Not intellectually, behaviorally. Have you shown yourself that you'll exit when invalidated? Walk away when done? Avoid emotional trades? Accept imperfection? If the answer is sometimes, then self-trust will be partial. And partial trust feels fragile. That's not failure. That's information. Now, here's an important reframe. Self-trust doesn't arrive suddenly. It accumulates quietly. One clean exit, one restrained decision, one boring session, one disciplined stop. None of these feel exciting, but they matter. And over time, they stack. The moment traders stop rushing self-trust is the moment it starts forming. Because rushing is a signal of impatience, and impatience is the opposite of reliability. To really understand why self-trust takes longer than skill, you have to understand what self-trust actually feels like when it's real. It doesn't feel bold. It doesn't feel energized. It doesn't feel like certainty. Real self-trust feels quiet. It feels like an absence of internal argument. When self-trust is present, you don't need to convince yourself to take a trade. You don't need to hype yourself up. You don't need to override hesitation with force. You simply act. Not because you're sure it will work, but because you're sure of how you'll behave if it doesn't. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in trading. Most traders believe hesitation means weakness, but hesitation often means your nervous system hasn't seen enough proof yet. And that proof doesn't come from studying more or watching more charts. It comes from how you handle discomfort. This is where traders accidentally slow their own development. They mistake emotional friction for a signal that they're not ready. So they avoid exposure. They reduce size. They skip trades. They wait for a feeling that never comes. But self-trust doesn't grow in avoidance. It grows in contained exposure. Exposure where risk is defined, exits are respected, rules are followed, emotions are allowed without being obeyed. That's the training ground. Let's talk about what breaks self-trust quietly. Most traders assume big blow-ups destroy trust. But more often, it's small inconsistencies. The tiny moments where you tell yourself, just this once, I'll let it go a little longer. I'll fix it next trade. Those moments don't feel important. But to your nervous system, they're evidence. Evidence that under pressure, behavior becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is what blocks trust formation. This is why traders often say, "I know what to do. I just don't trust myself." They're correct. Their mind knows. Their body doesn't. Now let's address something critical. You can make mistakes and still build trust. Chasing to feel better. Breaking structure to relieve pressure. Containment says, I can feel discomfort without letting it drive behavior. That's what your nervous system needs to see. And once it sees that repeatedly, trust begins to form. Not dramatically, gradually. Here's a pattern you'll notice when self-trust starts stabilizing. Losses stop triggering identity reactions. You still care. You still review. You still adjust, but you don't spiral. There's no internal collapse. You don't feel smaller as a person. That's trust. Another sign is reduced urgency. You no longer feel like you need to prove anything today. You're willing to wait. And waiting no longer feels like risk. It feels like professionalism. This is why self-trust accelerates once you stop chasing it. Because chasing trust signals insecurity. And insecurity tells the nervous system, this person isn't settled yet. Waiting tells it, this person is stable. Let's talk about the role of time, because this frustrates traders deeply. Skill can be learned quickly. Patterns repeat. Rules make sense. Execution improves. But self-trust is cumulative. It stacks across weeks and months. It doesn't reset daily. It remembers your behavior over time. This is why traders sometimes feel like they've lost confidence overnight. They didn't lose trust. They revealed where it was incomplete. And revelation is progress, even if it feels uncomfortable. Here's something important to internalize. Self-trust doesn't require you to feel ready. It requires you to behave reliably while not feeling ready. That's the paradox. Waiting to feel confident delays trust. Acting consistently creates it. This doesn't mean forcing trades. It means following criteria, respecting limits, exiting cleanly, stopping when planned, even when you feel uncertain, especially when you feel uncertain. Now let's address why many traders confuse anxiety with lack of trust. Anxiety is not a sign that something is wrong. Anxiety is information. It tells you, this matters. The goal isn't to remove anxiety. The goal is to prove to yourself that anxiety doesn't control behavior. That proof builds trust faster than anything else. When your nervous system sees, I can feel this and still act cleanly, it updates, it relaxes, it allows confidence to emerge naturally. Now let's talk about the final stage, when self-trust becomes part of identity. At this point, trading feels different. Not easier, but less personal. You don't interpret outcomes as reflections of worth. You interpret them as data. You still care, but you're no longer emotionally entangled. You don't need reassurance. You don't need validation. You know who you are when you trade, and that knowledge is stabilizing. This is the stage where consistency becomes possible, not because you're better than others, but because your internal environment is predictable. And predictability is the foundation of performance. If you're still in the phase where skill is ahead of trust, nothing is wrong. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're integrating. That process cannot be rushed, but it can be supported by respecting structure, honoring limits, allowing discomfort, acting predictably. Every clean decision is a deposit. Every restrained moment counts. And eventually, without fanfare, self-trust arrives. Not as confidence, but as calm. Not as certainty, but as steadiness. Not as belief, but as knowing how you'll behave. And that's the trader's hidden edge. If this episode helped clarify why self-trust develops more slowly than skill, take a moment to like the video. Subscribe for more deep dives into trading psychology. And leave a comment sharing where you feel trust breaks down for you most often. I'll see you in the next episode.